Hello once again, my audience. I'm Taylor, the casual crypt keeper, and today I've got something for you. We're doing something a little different today. No scary stories. Instead, we're gonna be playing detective just a little bit as we dive into the top 5 terrifying cold cases finally solved in 2023. Some of these cases took decades or more to finally get the answers, but all of them were eventually solved. You let me know down below if you have yourself a cold case that you find most particularly interesting, or one that you'd like to see solved someday. For me, the D.B. Cooper case, I'd love to know what happened there. Number 5, the original Night Stalker. The original Night Stalker, or as he's better known, the Golden State Killer cold case, is one of the most infamous and complex criminal investigations in recent memory. For over 40 years, the identity of the Golden State Killer remained a mystery, as he committed a series of brutal crimes, assaults, and burglaries across California in the 1970s and 1980s. Now, for decades, this case was pretty open, and was only closed in recent years around 2018 when Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, was identified as a suspect through DNA evidence. DeAngelo was arrested and charged with 13 counts of murder and numerous other heinous crimes, bringing a small sense of closure to the victims' families, and a reminder of why to never give up on an unsolved case. The Golden State Killer case also highlights the power of DNA in solving cold cases, because it was the use of a public DNA database that allowed investigators to link DNA from the crime scenes to a distant relative of DeAngelo, which ultimately led to his identification and arrest. This particular breakthrough actually sparked a renewed interest in the use of genetic genealogy and criminal investigations, with many other cold cases being re-examined in light with this similar technique. The whole case as well also showcases the importance of agency cooperation and the need for continued efforts to share information and resources between law enforcement agencies. This case involved jurisdictions across California, and it was only because they all came together to all work on the same goal that they were able to solve it. Now, while the arrest and conviction of Joseph James DeAngelo does provide a little bit of closure to the victims' families, it is also a stark reminder of the many unsolved cases across the country, and the need for continued efforts to bring justice to victims and closure to their families. And if you're looking for more cold cases, true crime, mysteries, cryptids, we have just about all of that and then some on Top 5 Scary. Basically anything freaky under and above the sun you can think of, we've done a video or two on. So hit subscribe, make sure you hit that bell, but hey, please do that at the end of this video, because I got more freaky cold cases for you coming right up. Number 4, the Lady of the Dunes. The Lady of the Dunes is the nickname given to an unidentified victim whose body was discovered in the sand dunes near Provincetown, Massachusetts in 1974. The woman was estimated to be between 25 and 40 years old, and her body showed signs of a brutal attack, including being nearly decapitated and having her hands severed. For 50 years, this woman's identity was completely unknown, a true Jane Doe and a tragically forgotten case. Now, over the years, there have been numerous leads and potential subjects, and all sorts of wild claims, all trying to help in their own way, including claims that the victim was an extra in the movie Jaws, which was being filmed in the area at the time. There's actually more evidence for that than not. In recent years, though, advancements in DNA technology have kind of renewed hope for this case. In 2010, a woman came forward claiming to have seen a man carrying a shovel in the area where the body was discovered. The woman was able to provide a composite sketch of the man, and DNA was later extracted from a hair found in the victim's hand that matched a family member of the potential suspect. Eventually, forensic studies of the bones would reveal the identity of our mystery Jane Doe was a woman named Ruth Marie Terry. Now, the Lady of the Dunes case is a haunting reminder of the many unidentified victims, but there are so many countless others who don't. It's another reminder, much like the Golden State one, that even if a case has been on ice for years and years and years, eventually technology will catch up, and as long as someone keeps pushing on a case, eventually these cases will get solved and bring just a tiny bit of closure to the victims' families. Number 3, Christy Mirack. The Christy Mirack case is a decades-long unsolved true crime that shook the small community of Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1992. Mirack was a 25-year-old teacher who was brutally beaten, and assaulted in her home while getting ready for work, which would lead to her death. Despite extensive investigations and DNA evidence collected from the crime scene, this case would remain unsolved for over 25 years, where it would remain on ice tucked away in a back folder, until 2018, when investigators used the technology, genetic genealogy, which we mentioned before, to identify one Raymond Rowe, a local disc jockey better known as DJ Freeze, as the perpetrator behind the crime. We explained it a little bit before, but I kind of glossed over it. Genetic genealogy works by uploading a suspect's DNA to a public genealogy database, which then searches for genetic matches among millions of people who've uploaded their own DNA. Think of it kind of like a DNA Google. In Rowe's case, investigators found a match through his second cousin's DNA, which ultimately led to his arrest. Isn't that a little bit interesting how many of these cases it ended up being they could track it through someone who was related to the suspect? I just find that fascinating. Rowe eventually pleaded guilty to the killing of Christy Mirack, bringing a small sense of closure to her family and the Lancaster community. This case was one of the first successful uses of genetic genealogy in a criminal investigation, and has since sparked a renewed interest in solving other cold cases like some of the ones we've mentioned here. Actually, here's hoping that technology can keep being put forward for more cold cases and we can solve as many of them as possible. Number 2. Linda Pagano. In 2014, a Reddit user going by the name Call Me Ice shared a story about an unidentified set of bones that was lying in a cemetery in Strongsville, Ohio. This user was researching another cold case at the time, clearly a hobbyist, and while searching for genealogy records, came across this Jane Doe skeleton and was fascinated by it, wondering why there was never an effort made to identify who the bones belonged to. Wishing to right an ancient wrong, the user posted to the subreddit Unresolved Mysteries in the hopes of crowdsourcing some answers. The Strongsville Jane Doe, as she was known, was first found in 1975 by 3 people who were exploring a nearby forest. They found a skeleton lying on a sandbar, mostly intact but missing some of its jaw. The bones were reported, and it was found to belong to a woman estimated aged 18 to 25 who'd suffered a fatal gunshot 5 months before being discovered. Police checked her across several missing women cases, but were unable to make any connections, and the trail went cold until 2014 when Reddit started to look into it. Eventually, the original poster got in touch with the cemetery and managed to get access to original autopsy files, including a photo of the skull. It was sent to a digital artist, and nothing much happened until in 2016, the forensic artist who had done the reconstruction came across a listing on the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, or NamUs, of a woman named Linda Pagano, who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances around 1974. Linda had come home from a concert and gotten into an argument with her stepfather, and supposedly left to go visit her mother. This was the last time anyone had ever seen Linda Pagano. The forensic artist then contacted the medical examiner's office and pulled Linda's dental records, matching Linda Pagano to the Strongsville Jane Doe, solving the mystery. Now, the identity of the attacker was never found, with some suspecting that it was her stepfather, but the family was able to find the smallest closure in knowing what became of Linda, and it never would have happened without a Reddit post. It's inspiring in a small way to know that sometimes when law enforcement agencies can't finish the job or can't close a case, that there are people out there who are willing to open source it. Keep that in mind for this similar case, also solved by the internet. Number 1. The Grateful Doe. The Grateful Doe is a notable missing persons case, a heartbreaking and mysterious cold case that baffled investigators for decades. This case began in 1995 when a young man was tragically killed in a car accident on Interstate 95 in Virginia. He was believed to be in his early 20s, but had no identification of any kind on him at the time of the accident. The only clues anyone had for his identity was that he was wearing a Grateful Dead t-shirt and had Grateful Dead tickets in his back pocket and was on the road in a van, so people assumed he was probably going to see the Grateful Dead, leading to the sobriquet Grateful Doe. Despite extensive efforts to identify the young man, including releasing sketches and posting information on missing persons databases and Grateful Dead fan forums just in case anybody was plotting to link up with him, he remained unidentified for 2 decades, 20 years. In 2015, a breakthrough finally came through when a Redditor recognized the victim from a photo of him taken at a Grateful Dead concert in '95. The photo was posted by the victim himself, who had written that he was looking for a ride to the next concert following the Dead on tour. With the help of the Reddit community and DNA testing, the victim was finally identified as one Jason Callahan, a 19-year-old from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Callahan's family had reported him missing in '95, but they apparently were not aware of his interest in the Grateful Dead and had not connected him to the unidentified victim in Virginia. Now, the Grateful Dead case is another interesting one, showing the power of the internet being used for good. The internet doesn't get used for good that often. It's nice to see the efforts of a determined group of online sleuths and, hey, fans of the Grateful Dead, let's be real, helping to bring closure to a family who had been searching for over 2 decades. And like all these other cases, it just goes to show that a cold case is never truly closed until you actually get some answers for it. It took them 2 decades of nothing until leads basically landed right in their lap. Sometimes you just gotta wait for technology to catch up. Now, while the circumstances surrounding his death are a bit of a mystery still, the identification of him have allowed his family to have a little bit of rest and allow us to move on from this case. And that's about all she wrote for this one, my ghouls and goblins. Thanks so much for watching. Creep on creeping on, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.